from our chapter on the ideal society. It is long erased from our memory except in the concept of a dream of a golden age. It is long forgotten that Earth has had golden ages, and historians count as fairy tale or legend or mythology those periods early in history before what has been called the fall of man, which is not really the fall of man, but it is the descent of the feminine ray, the descent of the female principle. Prior to the descent of that energy and the subjugation of the feminine aspect of man and woman, there was the fusion of the macrocosm and the microcosm. And because it existed once, we have the continuing dream and the striving for its realization. We see the Grail, and we remember that quest of the Holy Grail as more than a quest for the cup from which Christ drank at the Last Supper, but it was the dream of King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, to create that Golden Age society which Plato had dreamed of, Francis Bacon later wrote about, and also Thomas More in his Utopia. And we in our childhood dreams have also longed for this ideal society, and we speak of the idealism of youth, the reaching out for that which is perhaps unrealistic, impractical, but it is that surge of creative energy that is not yet stagnated, that flow of life as above, so below, that gives us the sense that we can create the fusion here and now of spirit and matter that will enable us to realize individually and collectively that Golden Age society. The dream is also recorded in the prophecy of John in the book of Revelation. And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. The Lamb is another symbol for this Christos, this portion of the self that is the point, the nexus of the flow of crystallization. It appears again and again. And the mystery of the unicorn, the pursuit of that unicorn, that fabled animal, what was its mystery? What was its essential energy? It was the energy of flow. So under the tutelage of cosmic beings, Manus of the races, there were first 3 golden ages that have been recorded by a number of mystics and writers in the last 100 years. These golden ages taking place on this continent and on the continent of Lemuria. A race of beings who never descended from their primal awareness of God in the chakras or centers of God awareness that are the third eye, the crown, the throat, and the heart. Maintaining awareness of self in the upper half of being, they were able to control the lower half, the lower chakras, and to release energy through the heart for, again, that crystallization of the God flame that makes a golden age. Our own heart chakra is the point of the nexus in the figure 8. It is the center of our being. Energies rise, energies descend, and the action of the Kundalini, the raising of the mother flame, is a part of the rising process, the drawing forth of the energy from the inner causal body, the consciousness that surrounds the inner I am presence, the descent of that energy, the rising of the energies of the mother, the fusion of these energies of the heart, is the release of creativity within you, one by one, that creates the components of a Golden Age society. The citizens, then, of these societies, which stretched around the world, were of what has been called the first 3 root races, the first 3 life waves to inhabit the earth. They never lost vision of their reality. They saw this Christos in one another and loved all with whom they shared the goal of becoming more of God. This was the goal of life, to become, to put on the garment of God's consciousness, to realize more of God as the essential element of self. They loved a man for his intrinsic worth and the unique design of his life stream, even before the God idea matured. In other words, with the development of the third eye, they had the ability to hold a blueprint or a matrix that could be filled in and realized. We find today the absence of goals, the absence of that pattern because we do not understand the origin or the ultimate of our existence. The family embodying the Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which is simply three words that indicate power, wisdom, and love, the three components or the three aspects that are the foundation of the flame of life, is the basic unit of the divine society, the family, because it is a nucleus of the Trinity. The Atlantean origin of the word family is father, mother, flames in loving union. Family is a code name, as many words in our English language are code names that have actually descended from the Atlantean tongue and from symbols, sacred symbols of Lemuria, which Churchward mentions in his books on the lost continent of Mu. Government and education in the ideal society are instruments for the development of the individual potential of man in harmony with all members of the community. This flow of harmony is this flow of the figure-8 pattern, where the realization of the golden age comes because there is a sense of the unity of what is known as the body of God. Seeing ourselves as cells in the body of God, as components for the realization of a grand design. Instead of striving against one another, atoms, molecules, systems working in harmony, and all understanding that functions of the individualization of the God flame are necessary to the creation of a whole. Instead of competition and a pulling against one another, there is this goal toward fusion, because in each man there is this sense of the fusion of the reality of the inner with the outer. All institutions, public and private, stress the unity of life through its triune aspects of faith and hope and charity. Again, the Trinity. The Trinity is realized in the name of God, Om, that comes through the Sanskrit. And the Sanskrit also comes down to us from the Lemurian tongue, the most ancient language. And the Om is the symbol of Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, converging in the center for the precipitation of you, the A-U-M. The intonation of this word draws your soul back into the inner reality of selfhood. Balanced in the Trinity, it is able then to bring forth the masculine principle, the feminine principle, in perfect balance in each individual, making for the precipitation or the crystallization of the Christ consciousness. So these aspects, embraced as power, wisdom, and love of God, the Trinity in action and a striving for excellency in all things, are the motivating forces. Striving for excellency, almost non-existent in our world today, and yet it is what has built every great civilization, including America. Learn to love to do well, and you shall. This was the maxim of Casimir Poseidon, who ruled an ancient civilization that flourished where the Amazon basin now is. Loving to do well is the theme of the building of a great society. When people lose the momentum of loving to do well, they lose their momentum of striving for excellency. Mediocrity sets in, the destruction of creativity. Then there is the stoppage of the flow, the control of the individual by the state, not for the release of creativity, but for the glory of the state. Hence, the state begins to replace the macrocosm of man's being. He is cut off from that flow, that energy of the causal body, and he becomes the outpicturization below of the state above. But of course, the state can never replace the spirit, the elements of reality, and therefore there is decay and decline. When the state intrudes itself, replacing values of the state for the inner religion of the soul, which always seeks to be wedded to God, religio, to bind. Binding the soul to God is the purpose of religion, not encasing the soul in doctrine or dogma, whether it be of the church or of the state. In the Golden Age society, adherence to this principle of learning to love to do well kept each soul striving to excel beyond the attainment of yesterday. Every form of activity, from athletics to mutual service, was seen as recreation, the recreation of the qualities of the Holy Spirit in man and nature. Recreation means to go over the lines of flow, continually, daily, dipping into the inner source and creating in the without, then consecrating the without to the inner source and sending it back to the source, so the flow never stops. We are seeking that contact with the source today. In meditation, we know there is that inner wellspring of life from which all creativity and life and golden ages come. By whatever means or teaching we can find, we are pursuing a golden age of consciousness. We are pursuing flow because we sense the stagnation of our bodies, our minds, our souls, and we know that the end of stagnation is death. There is much about the ideal society taken from the records of Akasha that you can read in Climb the Highest Mountain. I'm just touching on a few points. The leaders in the ideal society are the priest-king scientists. There is no separation between government, science, and religion, which are seen as a manifestation, again, of the tripartite flame of power, wisdom, and love. Positions of authority in the temples and in governmental, educational, and scientific institutions are awarded to those initiates who have passed certain degrees of self-mastery and who are thereby qualified to rule and make decisions on behalf of those still going through the tests and initiations which all must eventually pass in order to win their immortality. These tests are always the testing of the individual's ability to balance the energies of the yin and the yang, the within and the without, the macrocosm and the microcosm. And the perfect balance of the Tai Chi in movement, in body, in soul, in mind, in feeling gives the individual the right to rule. The right to rule in the flame of power as the authority of the state. The right to rule in the flame of wisdom, focusing the mind of the you, the mind of the Christ. The right to rule as a scientist who implements the flame of love in the control of matter. This is the role of the scientist, implementing the flame of love, because love is the energy of creativity, and science is the definition of creativity in spirit and in matter. When science fails to include the cause behind the effect, the spiritual flow of love behind causes in manifestation, it no longer is manifesting the science of God, but becomes the science of man, of the manifestation excluding its inner light and therefore stopping the flow.